ჩემი ხმა ისმის? საუბრობ თანასწორობაზე, მრავალფეროვნებაზე, ჩემს უფლებებზე, გამოცდილებებსა და რეალობაზე, რომელშიც ცხოვრობთ.
Hello, I hope everyone is doing well. My name is Annie. I work as a gender researcher at WECF Georgia. In today's episode, we will talk about the ecofeminist movement and its challenges, but let me give you a brief background before we listen to many amazing speakers. In the past months, we celebrated the 30th anniversary of Women Engage for a Common Future. Since its founding in 1994, WECF has been working on strengthening the ecofeminist movement with our global partners. And to mark this occasion, we hosted an ecofeminist fair. Throughout the day, our guests participated in interactive sessions, workshops, exhibitions, listened to live music, and participated in a free market, all connected to WECF key thematic areas of sustainable development, climate change, and a toxic-free planet. As WECF Georgia, we recorded a podcast episode during the fair with guests and amazing WECF colleagues from all offices. Among the speakers are people from various backgrounds, including music, art, agriculture, gender, human rights, and development. The podcast was recorded at the fair, so you may hear background noises, but I guess that's what it makes our platform more lively. Hope you enjoy it. What does ecofeminist movement or ideology mean to you, and how are you part of the movement?
Ecofeminism. What does ecofeminism mean to me? I think the definition has changed throughout the years. Very initially, it was something that attracted to me because it combined the ideas of gender equity and also planetary health and justice. And I think looking at how these themes interweave, such as through menstrual health being something that both can pollute the product through chemicals that are found in period products, but also something that places people that menstruate at a larger disadvantage, especially when faced with the climate crisis. As with also the feminist movement, I think ecofeminism has different meanings in different parts of the world, and also probably different generations. As I've been working a lot with the decolonist movement with universities, so I lead workshops on looking how to decolonize education, particularly medical education, which has a large history of exploiting, primarily Africa, but also a lot of Latin America. And in those discussions, we also very much consider how that has shaped global health today and the interlinkage with that in that dichotomy between the global north and south. And I very much often notice that the priorities in those discussions when it comes to ecofeminism is very different. That a woman from Europe or a person from Europe, let's say, might have different priorities in terms of climate justice than a person that lives in Gabon or in El Salvador. But the nice thing is with ecofeminism, not to completely kind of look at that hierarchical part of it, is that it gives a very powerful umbrella term to many different issues without necessarily placing a priority on one. And I think that allows then for certain marginalized voices to be perhaps a bit more elevated or to know that they can enter in a space that is not only looking at one dimension of an issue.
I believe that ecofeminism means really looking at the different systems of oppression and the different issues that we have in society in a holistic way, and seeing the interconnections between patriarchy and the effects on women's rights, and capitalism and the effects on nature, and how these interact with one another, but also connecting to all the different issues that are important for the rights of people, for human rights. So for example, also peace and militarism, how it's connected to capitalism, but also the high pollution of military interventions. So it's a way of tackling today's challenges in a holistic way and in a way that is inclusive, especially for people who were historically marginalized, and give them a voice as well. I work for an NGO that also looks at different topics in an interconnected way. starting more from the point of view of peace, non-violence, non-formal education and volunteering. So these are the tools that we use to then advance different topics of climate justice, gender justice, support for communities that self-organize, bringing people together from different countries, volunteering together so that they can break down stereotypes and eventually create peace in the sense of a positive peace. So I feel like through this work, and especially I work in communication, so amplifying the voices of our grassroots organizations, we are working towards ecofeminist world as well.
I learned what ecofeminism was about working at WECF, and with that I really learned about all these organizations that are really involved, these women organizations involved, the fights against climate change and the fights for their rights and their great solutions that they bring to all of these problems. And the movement is really trying to make our voices better heard, essentially, and that even though we're so diverse in the movement, that we actually get things working, essentially.
For me, ecofeminism, as I was contacted to ecofeminism in Germany, where is gender issues and feminism are less polarized than South Korea, where feminism and gender issues are used politically. So for me, ecofeminist is more like an equal approach to the climate change issues with all people, like outside of the binary model. For me, so with the term itself, ecofeminism, that really I think empowers all people to join the climate action and to join the engage for really common future, as it is named for our organization. Actually, I'm an intern at the WECF. And the ideology, what is the ideal image that I have for the ecofeminism is that everyone is just, when they hear about, okay, we are ecofeminists, and they just agree, everyone, including men, can agree with, oh yeah, makes sense, me too, it's for all people and it's for our common goods, for our future generations, for everything, not only for humans, also for animals and the ecosystem. That's my ideology I have, and I hope it will come true.
I think it's a difficult question because I think, of course, the ecofeminist movement means something different to everyone. So to me, the ecofeminist movement means a path of learning and unlearning, or de-learning. And I think one phrase that always stuck with me was that in a room with 200 people you will have 200 different feminists, so everyone will have their own experience of feminism, also of course regarding to your background, your class, race, gender, whatever. I think what nowadays I would define it is really the liberation of all and how to stand in solidarity with all the different kind of struggles. And I think for me the feminist movement is about being in solidarity with oppressed peoples or with any groups that are being oppressed all over the world, and in that sense it's also really what I said, this path of learning and about how to support each other. And in this supporting, of course, we are battling the systems of the patriarchy, of colonialism, of racism.
Well, I have to be honest, because the term ecofeminist, I didn't know that term for a couple of months ago, so I had to look into it. The funny thing is, I come from the time that the term feminist, actually for me it's the same, because feminism is about the economy and the whole system of people living on earth, nature, money, being equal. So, but after working for the WECF, I see even more how important it is for the whole world, but also the economy, that women get more lead. It will give us more sustainability, and in the end it will give us more money, if you like the money, but also more health. And I think it's time right now.
What are the challenges of the ecofeminist movement in Europe, and what could be the solutions?
Well, the challenges are, I would say, multiple because the current political situation does not have as a priority anything that has to do with better, like a transition to more gender equality or to fights against climate change and other environmental crisis. And the link between those is even like smaller, and I mean it's big, but on the political agenda it's like nothing. And so I think the challenges are really multiple. It can be on financing, it can be like getting your voice heard, facing patriarchal far-right organizations that really want to bring us down and bring nothing in return.
I think the challenges, and I think we also discussed that during the panel discussion, is that we should learn from each other. I think how can we make that my struggle is connected with the struggle of, for example, the people in Georgia, or for example with indigenous peoples in Mexico. I think that's the challenge, and that we have to become better in finding these allyships, or in finding these linkages between the struggles. Of course, I also feel it's a struggle that we are being attacked from the far right, and that I think a very, unfortunately, quite successful tactic is that there's being a lot of polarization in the movement, and it is very much focused at this fragment and rule, so that you're fighting each other out in the movement instead of that you're fighting against the far right. Even though I also think that we should be very critical also in a sense on ourselves. When I got into activism, I went to Bolivia, so because I did Latin American studies, and then when I got home, that was the first time that I realized, but women fighting gender-based violence in Bolivia is directly connected to my struggle for climate justice here, because we're fighting the same systems, right? And with that in my mind, I can feel myself more connected to activists all over the world that are fighting struggles that are different from mine, but that have similar roots, right? So for me that feels very good, and it's really nice to feel part of something bigger, actually, or part of a movement. Yeah.
Well, we just had a session actually, and I hear a lot of things I know because I get these barriers in my own life as well. But what we see globally right now is that the feminist movement went really well actually. I remember the 90s, because I'm a little bit older, where everything was free. Well, in the Netherlands, women's rights were coming up, the queer community was quite liberated, and it's a sort of, how you can say it, formula that if you go 2, 3, 4 steps in front, then you get a backlash, and we're now in the backlash. And I'm sorry to say, I'm specialized in the 30s, the crisis years of the 30s. It's the same thing happening again. Maybe the form is different. So if you look at the barriers for ecofeminism, it's actually a paradox. The fact that we get a backlash, that does mean that we're doing something well. They're scared. And there are not men, because I don't believe that, because I know a lot of great men who are part of the feminine community. But there is a group that is really hating this uprising of women and vulnerable people like the queer community, people, indigenous people, etc., BIPOC, whatever.
What should be done to better decentralize and distribute resources among grassroots and community organizations in Global South?
Well, first of all, to decentralize the resources, there needs to be awareness on what decentralizing resources mean. That, we colonialist past countries have stolen so much from other countries, and that there needs to be a redistribution of that, and also it's a fair redistribution because also there is need for alternative. So one of the solutions is evidently on international organizations to be more working on these topics, and international organizations, not only United Nations, but also everything that has to do with economy, like the OECD, I'm thinking, that are not, for now, sufficiently have that topic on their political agenda.
perhaps provide individuals living in low to middle income countries a fair distribution of resources and also rights. I think it's just to ask what the priorities are and to lead with that. I think often, if you look at a lot of United Nations organizations, there's a history of a lot of top-down ideology, especially if you look at the people employed, many of them are from not the local countries. So I think making sure that you have the people there and also diverse people, so have a group of people from an indigenous perspective, from a queer perspective, and of course also including men in the discussion, because I think ecofeminism in all areas of the world sounds very hostile to a lot of young boys especially. So I think creating an environment that just allows everybody to feel seen and heard is honestly the only way that you can arrive at that.
I work specifically on a project called Regain with 3 partners in DR Congo, in Cameroon, and Colombia in Colombia. And I think your question really spoke to me on how to mobilize resources and decentralize resources so that they can be accessible to grassroots movements, even in the global south, but also even in the global north. In the project that I coordinate, our main goal was to give access to resources to those grassroots organizations in those 3 countries. And I think that their main challenges is that a lot of funding comes from global north organization with very strict procedures and rules that them as small feminist grassroots organizations can never comply with. So I think the role that we can have as WECF is to facilitate them to have access to these resources, but not to control what they want to do, and just to give them the freedom to organize and to just develop the initiatives that they want to. This is why WECF, we don't want to be present in the country themselves. We just want to support from afar, because I think that a lot of the times maybe you're going to tell them what you want to do, but actually they should have the freedom to just develop whatever initiatives they want according to the needs of the population. And as a French organization, we also do a lot of advocacy towards funders themselves, like the huge public funding organization, which is the French Development Agency, to try to modify their rules so that they can be more accessible to grassroots organizations. That's also what can be done. When I talk to my partners, like the feedback that they give me, that a lot of the funding is really difficult to access because maybe they need the organization to be in existence for many, many years. They need them to have a very strict control of expenditures, like accountant departments. And I mean, a lot of these organizations, they're small, they don't have that kind of like strict structure, just because the beneficiaries and the communities they work with, it doesn't match. Like, it's kind of like a 24/7 kind of work. Sometimes a person is gonna come see you in the office at like 8 p.m. and you have to be available to talk to them and see what's going on. So I think that if you're gonna focus on like the global north standards of like these funding agencies, it doesn't match with the needs of the grassroots organization. So we need to advocate on their behalf also. That's our job as an ecofeminist organization. And also to bring them physically to these places like international negotiations where they can speak to them people and say, this is what is going on in our countries and this is why we need your help. And this is the great work that we're doing. I think that just recognizing that the great work that these women are doing is the first step towards actually providing those resources to them.
At the heart of any grassroots movement, you would see that it all comes down to resources, access to it, or the lack thereof. And when we combine it in the sense of ecofeminism, I would like to highlight the situation of South Asia, where most farmers are women, but they do not have any land ownership. So at the heart of it, they are the people who are working, but they don't have access to anything. And when we have calamities like the like climate calamities, which basically uproots their livelihoods, then in the aftermath of that, they are left even more vulnerable. And how the governments can intervene is to ensure that not only just by protecting the climate, but also protecting these farmer communities, which are especially driven by women, and empowering them in such a way that it is sustainable. So not only just helping them rehabilitate the communities, but also ensuring that the economic machinery of the farming industry or the agricultural sector keeps running, and that those reforms that they introduce are not only for the long term, but also are understood at the grassroots level. Because most of the time the governments intervene in countries of South Asia, the governments intervene, they introduce land reforms, for instance, but the communal struggle within different communities is so strong and it's so isolating for women that they do not rise to the top, and that they are left even more vulnerable. I think a lot of times when we talk about the global north and what it can do, we think of, oh, they should channel the funds and they should send in those funds through an INGO and sort of like a satellite offshoot mechanism, but that does not work. Why? Because at the ground, at the lowest level, at the lowest of the lowest level, people do not understand these things. So the first thing that they have to do is to create capacity for people within South Asia to understand these concepts, which for them is still very foreign. And that can only come when someone not from outside, but someone from within the country rises up and talks about it. So what the Global North can do is to create community leaders, give them the capacity, give them the skills to go back into their communities and talk about these things. Because if the government is talking from Netherlands about what's happening in Pakistan, people will not care, and they will be like, it's our country, it's our community, it's our cultural beliefs, we do not understand this, it's something that's very foreign to us. But if it's someone from within their own communities, only then can they understand the actual struggle. They will be able to word it properly, they will understand the nuances attached to it, and those will be the actual leaders with whom people can also sort of understand them as their own. So it's not going to be like a foreign concept, it's going to be something that's more homegrown, that's something that's coming from someone they basically associate with very closely.
Yeah, we are in Global North, and I would say my homeland is also from Global North, and I was really inspired by just the speech you gave about the situation in Georgia, and also this reminds me of the like a winner of Miss Earth last year or this year, and then she gave an answer how to solve climate change. She said it's a sympathy, and I was really touched by that, and also from this experience that in the morning we had breakfast and you talked about the situation in Georgia, for example, and then from that I could hear what's happening, but I could not totally put my foot into your shoes. But then after I hear what you put effort in your country to achieve your goal, I could associate more into your situation, and then I could throw away my privileged thoughts for a while, which were really peaceful all the time. So I believe also for fundings for the Global North, they should not just listen to their stories, but they should really get to know what are their problems in daily life, how the problems affect their really lives and their children and their families. And we can also imagine from that how it would be if it was me, because we didn't choose to be born in any countries. It's like meant to be so. Yeah, so I would say sympathy of policymakers and I know the donors and the people who are designing funding projects. Yeah.
So my answer might not be as tangible or solution-based, because through my research I actually realized that we had to take it a step back, and that there's a huge issue which is a lot of biases. So there's a lot of cultural biases, comparison biases, lack of understanding of the local issues. And this kind of draws back to the history between Europe and the countries that have been colonized. And this, I think, is still an issue. In one of my interviews, I actually spoke to a Brazilian farmer, who is a woman, by the way, and she said, well, we're not actually in the post-colonialism, we're still in the colonialism. And this is the biggest barrier, is that people in Europe, the ones who maybe have the money for the transition or to mobilize finances for the global south, they often have this way of thinking or this mindset that actually, well, in the global south, nothing is stable. We cannot invest because maybe there's a political power right now that is creating a lot of obstacles for the transition, and often they paint a very bad picture. So, for example, if we talk about agriculture, we talk a lot about deforestation. So in Brazil, often what happens is I spoke to a few very successful local businesses and startups made in Brazil, and they told me that a lot of investors in Europe were actually not interested in investing there or in putting their money, because there's this bad picture of, oh, Brazil is deforesting everything, and actually what we don't understand is the fact that we pay so little and that we keep wanting to extract from the global south. It comes back a bit to the concept of the resource-rich curse. So we're constantly in this cycle of buying cheap and wanting to pay cheap, so not paying for the social and environmental externalities. So it's a lot about the cost and the market that's kind of the boss. And so when you have that, actually, when you have this cheap price market, low margin market, you actually create opportunity costs for people to deforest even more. Because firstly, if we pay cheap, for example, if we talk about agriculture, if we pay cheap for products in the global south, then they're going to use cheap pesticides, cheap chemical inputs. Well, actually, no, they're very expensive, but they're not going to invest in the biological inputs you need to really have a soil or a land that can be restored over time. And so what happens is in 10 or 15 years' time, the soil is degraded. And instead of restoring that land, because they don't have the money, they actually go to a different land and deforest it, and then they do it again. It's another cycle.
I think, well, for example, in the Netherlands, we should organize more. Like, that's first. We should just organize. And we also, and that's also what we discussed in the panel, like so many times we're being sort of like pushed away from this idea that an other world is even possible, but we should really believe that it is possible, and we have to do our best to make it work. So I think we have to try harder. That sometimes I'm just like, we just have to do it. So I don't know how, but I think that this sort of like, I think we have to think more out of the box and like more out of like the paradigm that is being sketched for us right now, because of course that's like within this extractive capitalist system. And I also think we should not be afraid to try things, or like to, I don't know, I think oftentimes we have like this idea that we have to like do it all at once, but that should not be the case. It can also be that you organize like a solidarity dinner for like people in your street or like in your neighborhoods that don't have access to organic or like healthy food, and that way you also already sort of like have this like bottom-up community organization. I think we should really do better as community organizing. We should just listen more to. I also love that you just like when somebody asks like, what can we do? Yeah, just ask me. And I think that like we should not be afraid also of asking. But I also notice that with myself that like it's so easy to become into like white guilt of like, oh, I should not ask because like maybe I'll ask something very, very horrible or like something very stupid. But we should just like have the conversation about it, right? So I think also like the burden that's being put on like Global South activists here for constantly have to speak up for their own rights or for themselves. Like I think it also really is the accountability or like the responsibility of Global North activists to like make sure that Global South activists are not overburdened all the time. But of course we also, whilst at the same time also making space for them. But yeah, that's a difficult question.
Actually, it's my personal story as well. I try to sit on a table right now where a lot of white men try to decide a lot of things. And I know that if I get the chance to sit on that table, I can change things. But there's a door between it. So answering your question, how do we get the resources? Maybe it's really pragmatic, I don't know. But I think it's really important that more women are getting more higher up in the system. I hate the word system in this way because it's a pyramid. But I know that if a couple of strong women get the opportunity to get higher in the system, to sit on the table, then the resources will be there as well, because they know. I think they really know. And of course there are other ways to get resources, because you have to be resourceful if you want to have resources, and creative. I think as an artist, art can be a resource as well.
What is the role of ecofeminist movement in building the democracies?
To start with, ecofeminist movements, they really have this really great impact on their communities, because they really show on this very local level that like solutions are possible. And with the movement, it brings all these really great local solutions together, and all of those small solutions make like a big solution at the end. And that big solution is bringing up democracy, and because democracy is only democracy if it's like gender just, and if we fight, against this patriarchal system that makes it not democratic. Yeah.
I love that question, because first thing, and that's so important, is that we should also start democratizing our work more. So I think in order to build democracy, we have to truly understand what is democracy also for in our community, right? So that also means more democratic decision making in organizations. So, and I think, because I think democracy these days is such an abstract concept. Like people think, oh, if I can vote one time in 4 years, that's democracy. But it's not totally what democracy is, right? It's like also how can we collectively make decisions? So I think we also maybe should deconstruct what democracy is. I'm actually currently, my partner recommended me this book of how to democratize your work, and I haven't started yet, but I'm gonna start on it. And this is also with the idea that people don't think another world is possible, but it is possible, but because you just have to start practicing it also on local levels, and that means in your workplace, in your municipality, in your city, I don't know, with any group that you're organizing with. And that from there, I think you can start also feeling, oh yeah, this is the world we want to see, or this is democracy in the country I would want to live in.
Well, this is a hard question for me, because I have this really strange thought about democracy. I don't know if democracy works, and I think we need another system actually. I don't know what, because I'm not holy, I'm not like oracle or something. But something in me says that the democracy we know now is too old. Staying aware, first of all, and being responsible for what are you facilitating in this democracy, if it's there, because you have to own it. I think ownership is really important. But if democracy is the future, I don't know actually.